Today, I am going to analyze the opening scene of director Quentin's Inglorious Basterds. First, let me briefly explain the story background of the scene I want to analyze. This is a French village occupied by Germany during World War II, where Colonel Hans of the Nazi Party came to the farmhouse to massacre hidden Jews. We can see the daughter is drying the bed sheets in the sunshine. The sheet she pulled open, forming a clever framing composition, as if a curtain on the stage had been pulled open, and the distant sound of Nazis stepping on the piano rushing into our sight. The father asked his daughters to hide in the room, and the director created a strong, tense, and oppressive atmosphere through the composition of the picture, telling the audience that something bad was about to happen. Pay attention to this shot. The director used a long lens to make the trees in the foreground as big as the house in the background. We can consider this axe that splits on a tree stump as a metaphor and symbol of the Nazis. And the axe cutting a hole in the tree stump also hinted that the Nazis were about to split a hole in this family's house. In the first shot after entering the house, we can see that the window forms a framed composition, and the Nazi soldiers in the background are clearly visible. They've blocked the only exit, and this composition cleverly expresses a sense of oppression through the front and back scenes, making the audience worry about the fate of this family. As the pros and cons of playing lens and dialogue progressed, the father gradually moved away from the center of the lens. And at this point, Hans' sense of oppression towards the father had already formed. When the camera is aimed at Hans, it always passes over the father's shoulder and is slightly tilted upwards. And when shooting the father, the camera is always slightly tilted down and isn't passing over Hans' shoulder. The composition of this series of shots implies that Hans has invaded the father's space, and his aura has unconsciously higher than father's. The director constantly uses composition to depict the passive position of the father, highlighting his nervousness and unease. Immediately after, a moving shot circled around Hans from the front of the father to the back, causing a change in the axis. The composition depicting the back of the father implies that the father is trying his best to conceal some things. As the camera moves down, the director reveals the truth that Jews are hidden under the floor to the audience.
Well, I guess that should do it. However, before I go, could I have another glass of your delicious milk?
Well, of course.
The director used composition to make the atmosphere easier, and the composition of the two people reverted back to a 50-50 scale. Colonel Hans' previous sense of oppression seemed to disappear. The composition was different from the previous shots. The window was shot in, which forms a sharp contrast with the previously airtight scenes. The reason why the director did this is to let the audience relax their vigilance and then detonate another bomb when the audience's hanging heart is relieved. The next to close-up shots directly make the audience perceive the tension and oppression of the atmosphere clearly. The father's eyes became blurred, and the psychological defense line has completely collapsed.
Nous n'ennuierons pas votre famille plus longtemps. Donc, monsieur, mesdemoiselles, je prends congé de vous et je vous dis adieu.
this point, the screen becomes a vertical frame composition, further compressing the space. Accompanied by tense background music, the tense atmosphere of the movie has reached its peak. We can see the tilt and distortion of the horizon in the composition of the picture, which was also reflected in the previous picture. The tilt and unevenness of the horizon also highlights the oppressive atmosphere at this moment. However, Hans did not shoot, laying the groundwork for Susanna's revenge later, and a thrilling play had just begun.